Hello, my dear friends. How are you doing? Hope you are having an amazing day and not having to deal with drama. Ready for new stories I have for you today? Let's go to the first one. And don't forget to listen to the end of the story, guys, to hear my insights. Enjoy the stories. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment. My, female 23, parents got divorced when I was 12. My mother moved my younger brother and I to her boyfriend's home in a different city, and we'd visit my dad on weekends. A few years later, my dad married my stepmother, who told Dad that the custody arrangement was unfair to him and that he should get it formalized in court so he'd have more time with us. My mom, naturally, got very upset that Dad was now going to see a lawyer instead of following her rules like before and cut off visitation. There were a lot of ugly fights at this point, and Dad did get more visitation through court order, and he had to pay less money. Mom was very angry at my stepmom and talked bad about my stepmom a lot. In my teen years, I believed my mom and gave hell to my stepmom. Later, I gradually built a decent relationship with my stepmom. We are not close, but she has always been very nice to me and patient with me, so it is easy to talk to her. When I was graduating high school, Mom didn't want my stepmom at my graduation party, so my dad didn't attend either. I was sad about that, but my dad and stepmom did a different event for me, and my stepmom even paid a part of my college tuition, so I know she's not the person to stay angry at me. After my brother got into a fight with stepdad, he got kicked out of the house and went to live with Dad and stepmom. He's mad at my mom and is very close to my stepmom. So my mom is very emotional about losing him. She is very upset, so I have to keep assuring her that I will always take care of her and love her. I am getting married next year, and Mom had wanted me to wear her wedding dress. It's not something I want to do since it doesn't fit my body type. When I mentioned this to my stepmom, she wrote me a check and told me that's her wedding gift. From that money, I could buy the dress I want and get my makeup and hair done too. When I told my mom I will not be wearing her wedding dress, she got very upset, and I am trying very hard to respect her wishes and keep her happy till my wedding is done. She is very adamant that she can't stand for my stepmom to be at the wedding. I understand her position. She's always badmouthed my stepmom to my relatives, and having her there would be difficult for her. Plus, with my brother not talking to her, I don't want her to think that I have abandoned her too. I know my stepmom wouldn't throw a fit if she wasn't at the wedding. These things don't matter to her, but it is very important to my mom. The problem is that I am worried Dad won't take it well. He is very devoted to my stepmom. Would I be the a-hole if I returned stepmom's money to her and instead ask that she give me the wedding gift of not attending my wedding and talk Dad into attending it? Yes, OP is an a-hole for letting her manipulative mother have her way yet again at the expense of someone who has always treated OP kindly and compassionately. It sounds like OP's stepmom has been pretty wonderful and encouraged OP's father to build a stronger relationship with OP. And OP repays that by excluding her from things she would probably love to be a part of. I get that OP is in a tough spot and don't want to upset her mother. But OP should tell her that her stepmom will be attending the wedding, and that she has plenty of time to develop some strategies for managing her anxieties about being at the same event as her. It sounds like your stepmom has been incredibly generous and kind, and it's time you put your foot down and do your part in not letting this continue. She's earned her spot in your family. Update. I agree it'll be mean to ask my stepmom to not attend. I'll not do that. I'll manage my mom somehow. The wedding is a long way away. Hopefully, she'll adjust by then. A lot of you are making assumptions about my mom that aren't true, but I can't write a whole life story here. I know she acts out and makes some foolish choices, but she's not a bad person. Also, I like my stepmom a lot. I would never use her or hurt her. My boyfriend is 29. I'm 25. When I was almost 18, I was kicked out of home. My parents went through a divorce when I was 14 that got really bitter, and my dad got majority custody of me and my siblings by arguing that my mom's full-time job and irregular hours, ER doctor, plus history of mental health issues, depression in her early 20s, but she was in her 30s and well over it by that point. I later found out that the only reason he wanted us was so that he could get the child support. He has been unemployed my entire life. My mom died shortly after I turned 17. She left my dad enough money to cover child support until we were all 18, 2 younger siblings, and the rest in separate trusts that could only be accessed after we turned 25. Long story short, my dad flipped his lid when he found out she hadn't left him anything. At the time, I was also going through a really angry teen stage and was pissed that he had just remarried and that he wouldn't let me see Mom while she was in the hospital or go to her funeral. We spent about 6 months arguing constantly before one day he packed a bag full of my stuff and dropped it at my boyfriend's apartment and told me I wasn't welcome at home. So I spent 6 months living with my boyfriend rent-free. I did pay half the bills and did all the cleaning though. I found a job and ended up moving out. When I moved in, my boyfriend and I had only been together for 3 months, and with the stress of everything, we argued constantly. So moving out and getting some space was a good idea. For the last 7 years, we've mostly lived separately, with the exception of 4 months when my place was being renovated, and I paid half his rent to live with him. So I've just turned 25 and gotten access to the trust. My boyfriend and I have been discussing getting engaged, and I reminded him of this, and said that I'd be happy to pay for most of the wedding since there's a considerable amount of money in the trust. We were also talking about moving in together and had found a nice little apartment close to both our jobs that's within our budget. Problem is, at a dinner with his parents, he brought up how I stayed with him rent-free for 6 months, almost 8 years ago now. He went on to say that he felt, since I was now wealthy AF, in his words, that I should pay all the rent on the apartment for the first 6 months, plus the deposit by myself. He finished off by saying that his parents are offering to pay 1/4 of our wedding. He wants me to pay the other 3/4 by myself, and said that instead of putting some of his savings toward the wedding, he is going to buy a muscle car, so he can be a cool dad. Honestly, I couldn't believe it. I walked out of the dinner, footing them with the bill, and have been refusing to talk to him. Am I the a-hole if I refuse here? Not an a-hole. OP is his meal ticket. He got a maid before and wants a sugar mama now. He does not want to be equal to OP. He wants OP to spend her money on him so he can spend his money on him. The imbalance is obvious. I have a daughter who got married 3 years ago. Her husband, son-in-law, Kevin, has a disability. My wife and I always wanted to help and support him and our daughter, although he tends to be mean sometimes. We don't get along because of Kevin's behavior towards everyone, especially towards our grandchildren. Kevin would cause scenes at family dinners, birthdays, etc., starting arguments with my older son for no reason. Kevin and our daughter lost a 6-month-old due to SID. Then they recently moved to our city. We gave them an apartment and supported them, but they still had to pay rent so they don't rely on us to completely support them. Kevin keeps shaming us for asking them for rent, and so far we've been patient. We got busy with our youngest grandson's illness. He was 1 year old. Doctors were upfront with his condition, saying we need to be prepared for the worst. My daughter would visit, but her husband only visited once to compare his deceased baby to our son's baby, and how we all owe him for not being there when his son passed, but they lived hours away, and the death was sudden. Our 1-year-old grandbaby passed away last week. It was devastating to everyone. Our daughter came to the funeral with Kevin. He wore a suit, sat in front, and repeatedly asked if the funeral was over, saying since the deceased is a baby, then the funeral shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. Me and my son heard. Kevin kept moving in his seat, causing noise. My daughter did nothing, just watched. He was telling guests that the government should ban funerals for infants to save money and time and avoid gathering. I was livid. I asked my daughter to take her husband and leave. On the way out, Kevin extended his condolences to my son and asked him if his deceased baby had any unused clothes he could have to sell so he could pay me and my wife this month's rent. I got into a huge argument with him, called him disrespectful, and kicked him out immediately. I called my daughter then. She kept apologizing for his behavior, didn't say he regretted it or anything. I just told her that I will not tolerate this behavior and will be sending her and her husband an eviction note, so they needed to start looking for a place to stay. She called me unreasonable for how I acted, cruel and unsupportive, after she saw how he behaved at an innocent child's funeral. She wanted me to let it go and will convince Kevin to apologize. But what he said was irreversible, hurting a grieving parent. She kept apologizing, telling me he understands how hard it is, just that he feels it's not fair to lose a child so suddenly. She's been talking to my wife, saying I made a selfish decision and was trying to punish her for her husband's actions. My wife and I made the decision together, but my wife feels we might have been harsh on them. Not an a-hole. Having a disability of any kind does not justify mentally torturing others, and that is precisely what this a-hole is doing. OP's daughter is completely enabling him, and that non-apology is worthless. OP is under absolutely no obligation to support them, and he never was. OP should not let them guilt him. OP's son-in-law will not change. OP's daughter has made it clear she is with him no matter what. Time for them to be adults and look after themselves. OP should stand firm on the eviction, and if either of them contact OP to complain about it, OP should hang up, delete. My parents divorced 10 years ago. I know there was a lot of fighting, and my dad up and left. He still stayed an active parent in my life. I know that it was hard on my mom, especially because my dad moved on really quickly after the papers were signed. He got married around 2 years later to my stepmother. I have always loved my stepmother and view her as another mother. I also have one older brother and one older sister. They don't like my stepmother and have a tense and sometimes non-existent relationship with my dad. I was a daddy's girl growing up. I loved my mom, talked to her, was close to her, but was always closer to my dad. My mom was really sulky and bitter surrounding the divorce from what I remember, and it dragged on for years later. She finally remarried 2 years ago, and she seems happy. Even though she tries her hardest to hide her dislike of my dad and my stepmother, I can tell she dislikes them. I have never thought anything of the timeline surrounding their divorce. I was 8 when it happened. My siblings were older and remember it. My cousin, who was close with my older sister, remembers it. They never talk about it with me. Sometimes they get mad at me when I talk about my stepmother with them or similar things, but that's it. Last time I was with my siblings and cousin, my brother made a comment after I was telling them about my stepmother and dad coming to my graduation. The comment was asking if I put our mom through enough and why anyone had to be around that homewrecker. She was a tad drunk, and my sister quickly changed the subject. My mom has written in journals for as long as I can remember, and I was so tired of not knowing and wanting to get the truth. I found the ones around the divorce and read some of them. I wish I didn't, because I know I deeply violated her trust by reading them. I know she'd be upset. I also wish I didn't because I can't unsee what I read. My stepmother and dad had a year-long affair, which included things such as missing my brother's surgery to be with her, using my mom's money to fund vacations with her, introducing me to her in the middle of it, coming into the house and sleeping together in it, and trying to kick my mother out of the house. I am having a hard time reconciling these with the 2 people I know. I asked my brother about some of them, and he told me more. I get physically sick when thinking of the details. I realize how strong my mom was and how she put me first when my dad didn't. I can't bear to look at my stepmother, who is not the person I thought she was. This has opened my eyes up to a lot of things. I've skipped my weekends with them since I learned this, but now that my graduation is approaching, I don't know what to do. I don't want them there. I don't want to put my mom through being near them anymore, or my stepmother pretending I'm her daughter, or any of it. I don't know how to tell them because I know my dad will blame my mom and not listen. Edit. This isn't only about my brother, sister, and mom. They lied to me about how they met, when they met, and how they got together. They lied to me when I was younger, when they introduced us. I was young at the time and didn't remember, but I do now. They brought me into their lies. They have lied to me for years, have blamed my brother and sister, blamed my mom for all of that. I took their side against my brother, sister, and mom, yet those 3 never gave up on me. I blame stepmom less. It hurts that I got so close to her. I wish I didn't. I think OP should take some time and let this sink in, and try talking to her mom about it. OP should not tell her she read her journals, but tell her that her brother let some stuff slip and OP has some questions. If OP feels the need, she can apologize for having her stepmother around. Also, OP should know that none of that was her fault. My 24 female and my sister's 26 female mom died about 10 years ago. Our dad had just been diagnosed with cancer and she couldn't handle it. After her death, our father fell in love with a nurse of his who convinced him to get married ASAP. My sister and I know, because of the info given to us by our stepmother's brother, who hated her, that she deliberately predated on him, knowing that he had cancer and was wealthy. She kicked my sister and I out when we were 15 and 16. My father had little to do with us after this, as he was hospitalized and in and out of medical comas. His original will that was written when he was first diagnosed left our childhood home and enough money to cover the inheritance tax to my sister and I, while leaving the remainder of his money to cancer and mental health organizations. Our father died earlier this year, and it was found that his will had been changed 3 weeks prior to his death. It left the house and all his money to our stepmother, and the witness was an unknown man. Previously, the witness had been our mother's brother, who used to be very close to our father. About a month after our father's funeral, our stepmother posted on Facebook about her new relationship, which happened to be with the unknown man from the will. Obviously, my sister and I found this suspicious and decided to challenge the will. It has just come to a conclusion, and the will has reverted back to the original inheritance. However, our stepmother is potentially going to end up homeless. I don't feel guilty about challenging it, and since the courts found it to be wrongful, I feel justified in our actions. But my sister feels guilty about making our stepmother homeless. She is unemployed and borrowed money to fight us in court. Are we the a-holes here? I know Reddit usually swings for whatever the will said goes, but I think this is a special case. Not an a-hole at all. A nurse getting married to a patient is so not right. It just screams financial abuse. OP's father likely meant for the money to end up to OP and her sister. She sounds manipulative and almost definitely had a hand in this. OP should not feel guilty. She kicked OP and her sister out when they were a teenager.